Hi and welcome to BrightTalk, coming to you from Big Data London at London Olympia. I'm Tim Carmichael from Ensifera, and I'm joined by Gerard White, who is a data analyst from the software platform Looker. Gerard, welcome, great to join you.
Thank you.
And when we were talking earlier, we thought it would be a cool idea to have a conversation about three things that are important to us in a relationship between client-side data leadership and a software provider and enabler, platform enabler such as yourself. And I thought those could be summed up essentially in three C's, in collaboration, in compliance or governance, and culture.
Right.
Are you happy to talk about those?
That sounds pretty good. I think a good place to start here will be collaboration, right? So what are your thoughts on collaboration, if we're putting that first?
Yeah, okay.
Why are we starting here?
Well, I think because I've got this theory about how the cycle, the analytic cycle works. And I kind of picked this up by adapting something from my background when I was the Chief Data Officer for the British Army. Right. They called it the intelligence cycle. Now, military intelligence isn't just an oxymoron, it's also some value in it, and it's how you get value out of your data to solve a problem that really hurts.
Right.
So if I kind of break that down, I'm sure that you'll have some opinions in each of those stages. Essentially, I think you've got a first stage, which is about articulating and understanding the problem.
Right.
So some pre-thinking that has to be done, and that won't go away. And if the business thinks that's all done by data people, or the data people think the business is going to give them all the answers, you're already off to a poor start.
Sure.
So I think for me, the first stage of collaboration is about understanding the problem.
I completely agree. Like, this is not something that can be completely owned by the data side of things or the business side of things, right? Like, the modern workplace demands that these two teams collaborate and work together as closely as possible. Particularly as data professionals, it's important to remember that our job is to help people do their jobs better with data, and if we forget that, then why are we here? Right, so, and alternatively on the business, we need to understand that the data teams have a solid understanding of how data is represented, how it joins together, and the complexities around that, so we can really solve problems if we start working together.
I absolutely agree, and I think that this talks to the whole point about the first thing you've got to understand, therefore, is what is the problem you're trying to solve, and why? The and why is really important, so people get a better insight into how they might otherwise tackle the problem if going at it front on doesn't work.
Right.
Which takes me to, I think, the second step. So you've got this thing about setting your direction, and then you've got something about, okay then, how would we go around collecting the data we need and providing to problem solvers data of the appropriate high quality? So understanding where the data is and the important data that people need to help solve the problem, that the business side uses day in, day out, or would like to be able to use, understanding where it is, making sure it's of the appropriate quality, which is clearly not a trivial task, and then wrangling it into a place where people can do something good with that.
Absolutely, and also maybe recognizing that there are some things that aren't currently being collected, and sort of taking active steps to start collecting it where possible, or approximating or modeling data to give us insight on other data sources to get there as well.
Yeah, so looking for, if you haven't got the data you can collect directly, looking for a proxy, one good example is, what is the morale of my workforce?
Right.
Well, how do you measure that directly? Well, you might measure it by looking at the proxies of absenteeism, or complaints, internal grievance processes, this kind of thing.
Right.
Or just clearly surveying what's going on social media about you. I'll say the whole Glassdoor approach.
Absolutely, we see this all the time. If you can't measure customer happiness directly, well, maybe you can measure customer unhappiness, right?
Yeah.
Complaint letters and social media and that kind of thing. And sort of that plus a few other factors, you can put a score together on customer happiness. And of course then iterating further, right? Like taking more and more data sources and working on what works for the business to make that measure better. And more accurate over time.
And that's all collaborative still, because it's the business helping to say, this is what's important to us.
Absolutely.
These kind of metrics are going to be important to us. So in my theory about collaboration, I think you've got a stage about direction we spoke about, and about processing, and about collection, and now you've got a next stage about processing, and this is where some of the serious data science takes place.
Right.
But even in a place that you might think is the purview of specialists, of people who are building models and looking at trends over time and forecasting and optimizing as a result of that, I still think there's a role for the business in collaboration here, because they're setting up the business rules, they're helping with the taxonomy and the lexicography of what you're trying to do, and they're also giving you a set of informed assumptions that you're trying to work to as a data person. Do you see the same?
Absolutely, and the ownership as well is kind of on them, right?
Yeah.
Because they're probably being measured on decisions that they're making as a result of this data. So it's absolutely in their interest for these measures to be right and consistent and available to them, and for them to be at the table when these kind of models and things are being built.
And that ownership steps back into the collection phase, doesn't
Right.
it? When you're talking about data quality, because data in its usage improves in its quality, but you have to take ownership of that to make that happen.
Absolutely right. This exercise is not like a one and done sort of activity. It's a constant iteration, right? What your data model is saying, what's right for your business today might not be right tomorrow, or even if it is right today, it might not be right tomorrow. You might get a new boss, the market might change, you might get a new order status, something like that. And so being able to quickly change a shared model is really important to businesses, I think.
So I think in collaboration, once you've got that direction phase of understanding what you're trying to achieve and why, and you've done your collection and you've done some processing, what pops out of that is the insight. It's the first time you've harnessed data and delivered an insight.
Right.
But that delivered on its own will land nowhere unless you take it into an exploitation phase, and that's when you're really leaning back into the business in collaboration and saying, okay, look, here's some insight. What are you going to do with that? What decision are you going to take? How will you make that work? And again, there's a collaborative role there where there's a prompt coming from the data team, but there's real business understanding now coming into play.
Right, is it getting results, right? Like the fundamental high order bit here from the data team's perspective is to help people do their jobs better, right? Is this data adding value? Is it adding value to the business? Is it helping people out? And that's the most important thing, I think.
And therefore, in the exploitation of that insight is where you'll start driving value. And if the thing you're aiming for is value, however you articulate that value, it might be a monetary benefit, it might be a reputational one, it might be a compliance one, we'll come to that in a minute. Then however you articulate that value, it's about exploiting the data to make good decisions about the things that matter. But there's a last phase, in my view. There's still a collaborative phase, it's about dissemination. You've got your insight, you've made a great decision as a business leader or a data leader. Make sure people then know about that and act on it, right? Otherwise it won't land. And it's about finishing off that last bit. And if you want to automate it, you have to close that loop so that it becomes iterative from the dissemination. Part of the dissemination is, hey, what can we do next that would be better with that data model and work it and iterate it faster? Right,
absolutely. Like doing an analysis and getting some insight and putting it onto a dashboard for no one to look at benefits almost nobody. With the exception of the person who built the dashboard, perhaps. Right, and we'll talk about this later, but especially on the culture part of things, empowering people to trust the data and to be able to make decisions based on the data they see. That's super important.
That's cool. So wherever you are in this cycle, there's scope and an importance of collaboration between those that are doing the data, whether they're your home data team or their trusted suppliers, and those who are the users, demanders, and consumers of those data products.
Absolutely. It's total collaboration the whole way around the circle.
Cool, I buy that. Okay, let's move on to the second C, which we called compliance. Hey, it was to make the 3 C's work. It's really about governance, isn't it? Because there's a lot of conversations about getting the data governance right, and there's a balance to be had, in my view, about the need to govern to ensure compliance, what keeps us out of jail, and then governance to enable what makes us a profit, for example. So where do you think most businesses that you've been dealing with are on that scale? What's their feeling?
Oh gosh, some people are at every part of the scale at the same time. One of the things we've seen in the industry, certainly in the last sort of 10, 15 years, is this massive explosion of like self-service data exploration tools. And that's been really, really good because people have been able to explore the data as they see fit. But one of the challenges that's arisen is the sort of the siloing effect, right? The marketing team cutting up the data in one way and reaching some conclusion about something. And the sales team taking maybe a similar or maybe a slightly older or different data set and cutting that data up another way. And all of a sudden you end up with these two teams at the same table saying, I've got 76 and I've got 48 and I've got something else.
Someone else saying, no, I've got oranges.
I've got oranges, right? And so everyone has been with the best of intentions working in the best way they can, but we're on different pages. So one of the things we need to always be thinking about when talking about self-service or access to data is that idea of governance, right? Some sort of control between different departments around the organization.
Yeah, but I think, again, it's control to enable. Which is really good, because otherwise you end up with people hoarding their data, or they don't trust the system it's come out of because it's a bit clunky. We all know this, right?
Absolutely.
And therefore they have an alternative version of their data. Now, I've seen some people using this phrase, single version of the truth. I personally don't buy that. I think we're talking about sources of authoritative data so that people can gain their own perspectives on it. You and I might have a completely legitimately different perspective on the same base data. Do you see where I'm coming at? So that perspective can feel truthful to you.
Absolutely, and I guess we're all coming at this data set, whatever this data set might be, with our own sort of agendas and desires.
Sure.
Right? If you're in marketing or sales, we might be calling the same thing different things internally in teams, right? So as long as sort of data environments are set up in such a way that it's relevant and authoritative to me, that's what's important here. There is sort of a core central model which may be hidden completely to business users. It may be too technical or not of their interest to look at. But as long as that data has authority to them, that's super important.
Yeah, so the analogy I would use is that there's a car traveling between us, and your perspective, your truthful perspective is, this car's driving towards me. And my truthful perspective is, no, this car's driving away from me.
Right.
Someone else might say, no, I'm in the car, or maybe it's driverless, I don't know, but the whole point is that the authoritative data from which we draw our legitimately different perspectives is, it's this kind of car, traveling at this speed, in this direction, carrying this many passengers with this much fuel so it can go that far.
Sure.
It's this kind of base data, authoritative source data, that you should be allowing the business to draw for lots of multiple perspectives, because that's where the grown-up conversations take place around the board table or around the water cooler, so that people can understand what matters to them.
Definitely, like in this example, right, the car still has X, Y, and Z coordinates, right? It's still definitely in one place at one time. One of the things we've seen in the industry recently is the explosion of very high capacity, powerful databases. So previously, where we wouldn't have been able to store all this information in one place, now we can. Right, these sort of cloud-based databases like Redshift and BigQuery, we're able to do this.
Yeah.
And that combined with like a modeling layer enables different departments to access that sort of different data set in a different way, however they need to.
Now, that innovative technology or that emerging technology, well, it's becoming mainstream now, of course,
right.
Cloud approach. It takes us to our third C, which is I think, one of the biggest barriers to progress if you get it wrong, and one of the greatest enablers if you get it right, which is culture.
Right.
So what are your experiences of people's cultural approach to harnessing, exploiting data and analytics?
Gosh, see, technology and computers, they're easy, right? Like changing the behavior of people, that takes more thought, and it's not just a matter of taking a piece of software and installing it, and then saying, hey, this is the new religion, go nuts, right? It takes a little bit more time, and I always find with culture, helping people do their jobs better is a great start, right? Here's a system, we can give you this information to make this decision, and now you look great, right? But empowering people to actually investigate data, explore data themselves, is really, really important.
So as a Chief Data Officer, one of the biggest challenges I face is when I deal with people who have a basis of experiential decision making.
Right.
They've grown up all their lives working on their own judgment and their own experience. And then someone says, no, actually look at the data and take a look at that, and I say, well, hang on, I don't really recognize that data. Back to the coherence problem. I tend to get one of three reactions culturally. I tend to get glazy, rolly, and sparkly, because that's what their eyes are doing when they're talking to me. And you get glazy, who's the guy saying, I have no idea what you're talking about, and I hope you go away soon.
Yeah, some people are terrified of this stuff. Right?
Exactly. And you get rolly, oh God, here he goes again, banging on about his data. Leave me alone, Tim, I know what I'm doing, nothing's broken here.
Right.
And then you get sparkly. And sparkly's leaning forward, and even when you're halfway through your evangelistic pitch, they're saying, oh yeah. So you mean if I can do that, I can also do, and they're imagining their use cases and the way that they can drive value. The way I drive cultural change or promote cultural change in organizations, start with the sparklies.
Right.
Start with small benefits that they need, that they can then evangelize on your benefit. Because, hey, I would say this is a good thing, wouldn't I? It's my job to. They can feel it and understand it and believe it, and then their peers around them are kind of looking over their shoulder in the board meeting.
I want some of this.
I want a piece of this action.
Right, yeah, exactly. Like by putting sort of evangelists into different departments and taking advantage of those real leaders, it enables organizations to sort of build new cultural leaders, right, and sort of get that sort of cultural change around the organization, definitely.
And we shouldn't expect them just to be the senior guys. We can, wherever you find
it's better
them,
when they're not.
Wherever the sparkly eyes are, lean on those doors because they're already open, and let them take you into that business vertical or that silo that needs busting.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Hey, that's cool. So we've done collaboration. We've done compliance, which is governance really, and we've done culture, not bad.
3 C's, pretty good.
And it's been a partnership and a collaboration throughout.
Thank you so much, Tim.
Thanks very much.
Appreciate it.
Hey, that's us finished here at Data Talks for now at Big Data London. Tune in for the next one.